Hello, I'm Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123, where I like to combine my master's in English with my passion for the horror genre to talk about the books that I read. Today's video is an August wrap up video. So, after this quick intro, we'll come back and I'll talk about the books I read in August. I read 9 books in August, but here's a disclaimer. One of those books I started in July and then I finished in August. And then 3 of the books I started in August and finished at the beginning of September. But I felt like going ahead and talking about all of them in today's video. I didn't read as many books in August as I typically read. The good news is that every book I read was either a 4 or 5-star book. That really never happens. So I'm really excited to talk about the books that I read and obviously loved. So I kicked off August with an October vlog where I talked about 3 of the books that I read in August. So I'm not going to go into any details here, but I will link my October vlog down in the description box below so you can get my full thoughts on these books. But the books I talked about in that vlog are The Unmothers by Leslie J. Anderson, which I gave 4 stars to. This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno, which I gave 4 stars to, and Maggie's Grave by David Sodergren, which I gave 5 stars. The other book that I want to talk about just briefly here is The Once Yellow House by Gemma Amore, which I rated 5 stars. I'm not going to talk about The Once Yellow House here because I did a short video essay comparing that book to Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper, and I will link that down in the description box below too, so you can hear my thoughts on both of those works there. The first book I want to talk about is Dark Tales. It is a collection of short stories by Shirley Jackson with a foreword by Otessa Moshfegh. And look at this cover. It's so cool. And guess what? It glows in the dark. And here's a funny story. I had it sitting on my table there by my chair in my living room, and we turned off all the lights and we were about to go to bed, and it freaked my husband out because he looked at the table and he's like, "What is that?" I said, "That's my book. It glows in the dark." So I think that really encapsulates a lot of what this collection is about, because Shirley Jackson loves to take the seemingly idyllic home life, the home itself, suburbia, and subvert the expectation that everything is as nice as it seems on the surface. There is something sinister lurking in each of these stories, whether it is a man going, about his daily commute from work to home, something that he's done time and time again, but there's something sinister there. We have my favorite story. I love my husband. I always feel like I have to give that as a disclaimer when I talk about some of my favorite stories. But my favorite story in this collection is called What a Thought. And it is about a wife who suddenly begins to have a murderous desire to her husband. There are a lot of other stories in here. Just very eerie stories that feel unsettling and they kind of creep up on you. And at the end, sometimes you're like, now what happened? And then you have to go back and kind of read a little bit. But I absolutely adored this collection. It would be perfect for spooky season, but I had to go ahead and read it in September because I just couldn't wait. All right, then let me talk about my next 4-star book, and that is Edifice Complex by Michael Wertenberg. And if you don't know Michael, then you should know him. Not only is he an author, he's a fellow booktuber, and I'm going to link his channel down below. So this is a book set in Paris, and we're following the story of a man who is overwhelmed by sound. He actually has a condition that I want to look up here because the author himself experienced this condition, and he talks about it in his book. So I won't go into it a lot because I want you to get this book and read it for yourself. But it is called hyperacusis, and it is characterized as a reduced or extreme intolerance to sound. And it states that those suffering from hyperacusis may find ordinary sounds uncomfortable, and louder sounds can even be painful. So, our main character is experiencing this, and he needs a place to live. He has a twin brother, so there's also some really interesting elements done here too, where you have some dynamics with twins. His twin brother is kind of protective of him because it's pretty obvious that the main character has some, mental issues going on. He does see a psychiatrist, which is nothing wrong with that. Hey, I see a psychiatrist too. But his brother ends up having to leave Paris, so he lets our main character stay in his flat or apartment. And the main character develops a sexual relationship with the building, and he is very angry when people are not taking care of the building properly. He gets very angry when people are, disturbing the peaceful silence with noise, whether it be a dog barking, people playing music, people talking, people laughing too loud. And he just delves further and further down into a spiral. And I really don't want to say much more about this because you really need to go into it, because his obsession leads to murder too. And it'll make you think twice about annoying your neighbors by being too loud. But yeah, you got to pick this book up. It is so much fun. The next 4-star read I want to talk about is Heads Will Roll by Josh Winning. This was a mood read I picked up to listen to on audio, and I'm so glad that I did. It was a perfect book to kind of end summer and begin fall with. We're following the main character who is a star of a sitcom show, and she tweets something that causes her to get canceled, as they say. And so she ends up going to this summer camp for, I think it's like supposed to be a week or 2 weeks away, where she has to turn in her phone, laptop, any kind of device that would keep her connected to the outside world. And so she's there with fellow campers, all adults. It was like a summer camp for adults. And they have to do the same thing, of course, turn in their devices because they're all dealing with something where they need to be able to kind of get away from everything and not be in contact constantly with the world around them. And while they're at this camp, there suddenly begins to be disappearances. They find fellow campers dead. So a sinister undercurrent has taken over at this camp. And so it is a lot of fun as you're trying to figure out who's the killer, why is this person doing it. And there's like kind of also you have the main story that's going on, and then every few chapters or so you get a little like information that's like evidence, and it starts talking about text being exchanged between people, kind of giving you some ideas about who may be the killer. I'm probably not explaining this well because I flew through it because it was so much fun. But I do want to mention too that you should check content and trigger warnings for this book, because although it is a lot of campy fun, it also has some serious commentary as well. So be sure that you look into that. And that's all for the 4-star book. So now we're going to move on to 5-star books. The first 5-star book that I want to talk about is Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. It took me a while to get to this one. I'm not really even sure why, because I've read all of her other novels and loved every one of them. I've pre-ordered her newest, So Thirsty, which is coming out in a couple of days from when I'm recording this video. So I cannot wait to read it. But Black Sheep, we're following our main character, Vesper, who we know from the opening doesn't really have any contact with her family. And we find out that's because her family is extremely religious, and beyond that, they're actually members of a cult. So she decided when she was 18 to break away from that. But she got an invitation from her childhood best friend to a wedding. And she finds out that her childhood best friend is marrying her former sweetheart, who are both still in the cult. So she's never thought about going back home really, but because this wedding is taking place, she decides to go back home. And when she goes back home, of course, she confronts her religious trauma. She confronts all of the issues stemming from being raised in a cult, and it takes a bit of a turn. There's a little twist on it, where it's not exactly what you might think it is on the surface, but nevertheless, as someone personally who has experienced religious trauma, I found a lot of the commentary to be very validating, and definitely I could identify with the main character. And at the same time, it's just a lot of fun too. Rachel Harrison is often called a cozy horror writer. And that's especially true in a book like Cackle. But I would say Black Sheep is not quite as cozy as Cackle. But I still think it's a good one to pick up if you're trying to branch into horror, especially during this spooky season. And the final 5-star book and the final book for this wrap up is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. It was described as Get Out meets Parasite. It is supposed to be adapted to a Netflix movie soon. And I was kind of hesitant going into this one because there's a lot of hype around it. And a lot of times, especially lately, I've had very little success with books that were really hyped up. But I'm so glad that I gave this one a chance because I loved it. It is so unsettling. It is so creepy. So let me tell you what it's about. So it opens up with Eve, who lives in this house with her girlfriend, Charlie. And Charlie has gone to town. And what they're doing is they bought this house. They like to renovate and flip houses. But while Charlie's gone, there's a knock at the door, and Eve answers the door, and there's a man standing there with his family, and this man claims that he used to live in this house when he was a child. And he was, curious to find out whether Eve would let him come in and bring his family so they can kind of look around, and, he can show his family where he used to live. So naturally, she's hesitant to do this, and she's not as assertive as Charlie. So she calls Charlie, hoping that Charlie will say, tell them no, so that way Eve can go back and say, my girlfriend says no. But when she calls Charlie, Charlie doesn't answer the phone. But Eve still decides to use Charlie kind of as the bad guy and go and tell this man, no, I'm sorry, my girlfriend said no. However, this man's daughter is very despondent. She looks very disappointed. So Eve has second thoughts, excuse me, and decides to go ahead and let this man and his family in. Now, after that, very creepy and strange things start happening. I know I keep saying creepy or unsettling, but it's really kind of hard to describe this book. I have also heard it described as House of Leaves Light, which I don't know because I've tried to read House of Leaves 3 times and I have not been able to get very far in it. But I am going to read it in November. So if you want to join me for that. But back to what I'm talking about. So in We Used to Live Here, you also have a multimedia format. You find out that this man who claims he used to live here is not being completely honest about his experiences, about who he is, about his connection to the house. You have Eve beginning to second guess what's real and what isn't because the house is changing. people seem to be changing around her. She doesn't know if people are really who they say they are or if they've been replaced by someone or something else. And there's a lot going on here, and I'm probably making it even more confusing than what it is. But this book, I was, again, like I mentioned with a previous book, I could not listen to this book fast enough. I had to know what was going to happen. So I definitely recommend this. In my opinion, it lives up to the hype. So those are all of the books I read in August. Like I said, 4 and 5 star month. So I can't really complain about that. So let me know, which of these books have you read? What was your favorite book you read in August? And if you like this video, then please hit that like button and subscribe and hit that bell so you won't miss a video from me. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.